Okay, everybody. Hello, everybody. You guys alert and ready?
Yes.
To close this out with the grand finale for the weekend? You know, I had a kind of a feeling yesterday when I saw everybody here, and a lot of people like yourself, especially yourself, that was here from like morning until evening and sitting in the chairs. And I was like, this is very interesting because it's really much like a group healing experience. We're all going through a process. It's almost like a spiritual retreat in the form of a conference. You know what I mean? We're all getting the same information. We're all here getting the same upgrades. And then we have opportunities to integrate it. And it's truly about integrating this information because it's not about what's up in the head and conceptualizing this, but really feeling it. But then trying to figure out a way to feel it. Like, what is the modality? What is the way? How do we actually integrate it into our bodies? And for myself, it's been sound and vibration, frequency, which is why we have that component. Like when I was marketing this event and promoting it, I would say like it's more like a sound healing concert with aliens and ancient history, you know. And it's truly about having that experience and being a part of that vibration, right? So I hope you guys felt that and you really got something from it. And I truly hope to see you all again. And it just really means a lot to myself and the whole team here for you guys to be here. Okay. Thanks. All right, so we're going to get into our next presenter. And the next presenter, he has been having experiences of the multidimensional, interdimensional, all types of ultra-terrestrial kinds for his whole entire life. And at certain times in his life, he kind of had to put it to the side because there weren't people around that really he could speak to about this. And then later in life, he got the opportunity to start expressing it, and he is now here and out around the world speaking about the reality that exists beyond this reality, you know? And we were talking earlier that the paranormal is now becoming the normal. What was once alternative is now becoming the mainstream, and the word paranormal really should be normal because this world's paranormal. You're vibrating frequencies, man. Why do you look like a solid being? You know, like you should not look like that, and science proves that that's not the case, right? And Jason Quitt has had firsthand experience of this. And today's presentation, we've been going back and forth about this title for a few months, and I was extremely excited that he was going to speak about this because it's really taken us to the core of what he has experienced, which is the space in between. What is the space in between? What is it? An astral realm? Are we traveling somewhere? Is there something in between these realities? So today he's going to bless us with this presentation in which he's going to explain from his perspective what this world is. So let's put our hands together for Jason Quitt.
Let me just make sure this doesn't pop up again. Oh, thank you, Neil. This is my second time here, and I'm very happy to be back. And I'm happy to share this new presentation. How many of you saw who was here last year and saw my presentation last year? Great, great. This is a new one. So we'll have new stuff. All right. So I'm going to start with a quote from a good friend of mine, Nikola Tesla. And I hope all of you know who he is. The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in one decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. And this is like a very profound statement. And this is what we're doing right now, is we're trying to explore this unseen world that's around us. And by actually diving into this information, we're going to learn so much more. And this man was definitely ahead of his time. In fact, if we would have listened to Nikola Tesla over 100 years ago, we would probably already have colonies all over the star system. And that's how fast it would have been. Free energy and all that great stuff that he brought to this world. So I'll give a quick introduction with this very scary picture. How many of you have had sleep paralysis? A lot of you. It's not a fun experience, is it? You wake up at night and you're basically frozen in bed and you can't really scream because you're paralyzed. So you're screaming in your mind to wake up, and many times it feels like there's a presence in the room with you. It feels like there's something sitting on top of you and you can't breathe. And this experience happens to, I think they were saying it's about, it's in the millions of Americans. I think it's 3 million Americans a year experience sleep paralysis. So it's a very known thing. And they just say it's your brain waking up, but your body is still in sleep mode, which is actually completely true and accurate. But they say that it's a hallucination. And what I'm here to tell you is it is not a hallucination. The things that happen in that between state are very much real, but we haven't accepted that as our reality. So this would happen to me every single night in my early 20s. And I started to get very comfortable, if that's a proper word. I started to get very comfortable having these experiences because it was happening so often. And I could feel a presence in the room with me walking around. So one night, I really didn't want this to happen, so I was just kind of shaking inside my body. And it's very strange because when you're in this state, the physical body becomes your tomb, and you have another body. It's a very strange thing. You literally have another body within your body, like a Russian doll. And I could actually move this other body inside the physical body. So I'd be shaking myself inside to try to wake up. And one night I shook so hard that I popped out of my body and had an out-of-body experience in my early 20s. And I rose out of my bed. And it was quite frightening because at that moment, you know 100% that your consciousness exists when the body dies. And when this occurred to me, it's just like, holy shit, I'm dead, this is real. I'm not going back because I could see my body in bed sleeping or in paralysis. And at the foot of the bed was a being, very tall shadow that looked just like the Grim Reaper. And obviously that scared me even more. And I just thought that I died. That's exactly my state of mind. And I was so scared that I actually got sucked back in my body and I woke up. And then from this experience, it's almost like you get a taste of these other worlds and you know it's real. And I don't know if it's a kind of sick obsession, but I had to get back there. I had to do it again. I had to feel what I felt. So at nighttime, I would meditate and put my mind to sleep. I put my body to sleep and keep my mind awake. And then I would do what I did before. I would shake myself inside my body until I popped out and had these out-of-body experiences. And when I started to do this, I started to have contact experiences. I had beings that started to come to me to teach me. And at first, they were beings that didn't really look like anything. You could see the frame of their body, but you could see right through them. So no defining features of these beings. And what they would do is they would take me up into outer space, out of my body, and I'd see the earth, and I would go back to the earth, and they would show me different scenes of basically end-of-world things, the world being destroyed, carnage, wars. It was a really terrible, terrible experience. So a lot of people that have awakening experiences, it's not just happy, beautiful things, it's actually quite traumatic. So I didn't like this new ability that happened to me, and I prayed it to go away, and it actually did. And then new beings started to come to me. And this is one of those beings. So imagine just waking up in the middle of the night, and it looked like just a cloaked being standing in the room with you, and it speaks to you telepathically, so there's no voice. And I can't see its face. It's always a shadow in the face. And one of the messages that it said to me was very interesting. It said, "Eons and eons before time began, many lands, many universes were drawn together by the spider's web. This spider web was a way for many civilizations, many universes to connect and communicate with one another." And I started to actually travel this cosmic web, this spider's web. And it really opened me up and taught me things. And this is what it looked like from a bedroom perspective, is that as I would sleep at night, I would pop myself out of my body, and when I'm hovering in the bedroom, a portal will open in that space. And portals are all different types of sizes. I've seen portals that are just very, very tiny, portals that are very large, but they pull you to different places. And I'll describe what it's like to go through a portal. It just looks like a black hole, basically. You can't really see anything. And when you go into it, it feels like this magnetic pull, like a vacuum. It just sucks you into it. And it sounds and feels like high winds going past your ears and like white noise. But you don't have ears, which is very strange. So you're hearing from a different sense. And the walls of the portal, or the wormhole, whatever you want to call it, you know the static on a TV? It's the complete negative of it. So it's like black static if you looked at the sides of the portal. And then you pop out on the other side, and you could pop out in outer space, you could pop out on the surface of a planet, you can pop out in the atmosphere or under the water. So these portals kind of lead you to many different places. And here's a picture from Egypt of the Ba, the astral body. And standing there is a shadow. And when I saw this, I couldn't believe this image from Egypt, because the story of this picture is that the shadow is the aspect of your soul, and it's not bound by your human existence. It could travel freely. It has no personality or identity. But at nighttime, it sometimes goes on journeys with the astral body through portals. So to understand a lot of Egyptian artwork, we have to understand the multidimensional world of the spirit. So this was happening to me in my experiences, and I could see visual representations of my experiences in ancient Egyptian artwork, which I found fascinating. So I'm trying to remember the year of this. I think it was 2014. 2014, I was invited to the Alien Cosmic Expo in Toronto. And I've never spoken to a UFO crowd before. I was always speaking with the consciousness and the healing communities, and that's where I got my start in shamanic circles. And I walk into this lobby of the hotel, and there was a huge poster just like this. It said, "Intrusion, Alien Encounters Bob Mitchell." I had no idea who Bob Mitchell was, but a big poster of that was right in the lobby. And I walked up to Bob, which is that man in the top left, and I said to him, "That manted being is so good. That's like the best picture I've ever seen of a manted being. They got it perfectly right, because I've had encounters with this being in my journeys." And he was very surprised that I mentioned this, and he came to hear me speak. And at this lecture, I spoke about past lives, I spoke about Egypt, I spoke about my perspective on the spiritual realms and how different beings inhabit these multidimensional worlds. And he never heard anybody talk like this. So right at the end of the lecture, Bob Mitchell came up to me and he said, I've been a sports and crime writer for the Toronto Star for over 40 years. And I'm looking for a new project, and I really want to write a book with you. I've never heard anybody speak like this. So I said, of course, let's write this book. So there you see at the bottom corner, there's the book Forbidden Knowledge, which is also back there. That's the book that we wrote together. And we have the time traveler Nikola Tesla next to us as well. Real man. And it was only, I think it was like 2 months after this photo, Bob Mitchell passed away. So it was a very short span of time of knowing this really amazing person that helped me put this information together. And I feel like I've really helped him a lot because he had no understanding of any spiritual concepts or life after death or all these other worlds. So, you know, it was very synchronistic for him to meet me because I feel like I was with him through the death process. And we became very close because of that. And he's still here, which is really amazing. But this is what we would always talk about on the phone. In this book, Intrusion, he had hundreds of experiencers from around the world give him their story of abduction and contact experiences. And he found out that there was a common theme between all these experiences. And what that was is that he found that out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, altered states and abductions, contact experiences, they all followed the same type of themes, and he started to understand that maybe they're all connected, maybe it's all the same thing. So, here, I'll just go over some curious cases so you understand what I'm talking about. The whole thing with me is that I was completely aware of my contact experiences with other types of beings that people would describe as alien. And I knew it was out-of-body experiences. I knew it wasn't physical. I had to physically leave my body to have these beings standing in the room with me. And if you've never left your body, you will not know the difference between the physical body and the astral body. It's exactly the same. So it's very, very confusing. And that's why when someone dies and they end up out of their body in their astral body, they're in shock. They still don't know that they're dead. So a lot of times when you're being abducted or taken on these experiences, your body is still sleeping in bed. This is what a lot of people don't understand. Your body is still sleeping in bed, yet your consciousness, your astral body, can be taken. Things can be done. You will perceive it to be 100% real, but if a skeptic put a camera up in your bedroom and you said you had an alien encounter that night, and you go over the footage, it'll show you just sleeping in bed quietly. And then you're a crazy person, right? So we can be taken astrally on these abduction scenarios. And there was all these things that lined up. The person experiences a vibration. They feel like a sensation of a movement or an energy or a warmth in their body. They may feel paralyzed. They may hear strange sounds, like electrical sounds, robotic sounds, clicks, pops, white noise. They hear these sounds. They could see a light in the room. Other beings will appear in the room, and then you're floating above your bed. You're being levitated, and then you can move through the walls, the floors, anything. So this is a common thing that goes across abductions, contact experience, near-death experience, and out-of-body experience. It's exactly the same things that happen. And this is from Jacques Vallée, who interviewed a woman named Helen in a UFO documentary in 1979. And when I heard her say this, it was just a really interesting thing, because we're talking about a very early contact experience that happened to a car full of people. There was over 4 people in this car, and they saw a ship, and they saw light coming down through this ship, and it hit the individuals in this car. And she described it as her, what did she say exactly? She said that their molecules were going through the roof of the car along with mine, and none of them lost consciousness as this was happening. We were completely conscious of going through the roof of that car. So this was a woman saying that the bodies were still in the car, but the molecular body, she was trying to describe that the molecular body came out of the body with this light, and it went through the roof of the car, and all four of them remained completely aware and conscious that they were being taken out of this car. So people that have gone through this experience know what we're talking about is not a physical thing, even though our brains and our memories will interpret it as 100% physical. And I'm not saying physical things do not happen. I'm saying that most of them can be classified in this out-of-body state experience. And here's Barry Littleton. Does anybody know Barry Littleton? Has heard Barry Littleton? You should definitely know this man. He's a lifetime experiencer just like me, and he has an incredible sense of humor, which is amazing. And people, especially in this field, we need a very good sense of humor, okay? That's how we cope and survive, and it's a very high frequency, is to laugh. Anyways, Barry would be taken all the time, just like me. We'd have very similar experiences, but Barry was very stubborn, and he would always say, no, I don't want to be taken astrally. You better take my whole freaking body in that spaceship. I want to go physically experience this, not astrally. So one night, Barry got his wish. All right? So I have to describe it because it's very strange. All right? So first, he's flying through space and he sees this craft. Like, how retro is that? That's like the Adamski UFO, right? And I'm thinking, like, you look at this and you're like, this is so fake. Like, it's like a toy in the sky. This is not real. But he said something very weird. He said, as he approached the ship, it morphed into this. All right? So here's the first question. Do these ships put out a holographic image to what we think we should perceive? Right? That's why through the different ages, maybe the UFOs change depending on our conscious awareness of what the UFOs should look like. I don't know. But he comes up to this giant Merkaba crystal in space, and he gets pulled in through this crystal, and he says he finds himself in this room. This is his art. And he finds himself in the room. He calls this the engine room. And he says, you can't really see it from here, but he says, this room is the size of an entire factory. He says, this is so massive that he's just a tiny little guy in this huge, huge room. He said this room was bigger than what he saw the outside of the spaceship looks like. So now we get into another curious thing. So the inside of the ship, the rooms of the ship, are bigger than the outside of the ship. Doesn't make any sense. And he said there was this black box, and it had this kind of like vortex energy going through it. And he said that this was a time dilation drive. So it was like a time machine. And he said there was like a black hole inside this box. That's how he described it. And he said he went to another part of the ship, and he said the ship was like physical. It was like a mushroom. So the walls of this ship were alive. It was like a alive being. And through the windows of the ship, he wasn't looking into outer space. He said they were other dimensions. And there was orbs and lights and weird things that he could see through these viewing windows into other dimensions. And again, this room, he said, the picture doesn't do it justice. This room is massive. So we have to ask ourselves, have advanced beings mastered space, time, and dimensions? Can these higher beings actually create different dimensions? because he says as he would go into a room, so this is his own experience and words, is that when he would go into another room, he said there would be a mist. It's like he makes the decision to enter a room, and then a mist, he said that smelled like ammonia. A mist would come in and cover him, and then he would go into the other room and he would drop to his hands and knees like he's going to throw up, because he's saying that it was like each room was its own unique dimension, and it had its own spaces within its spaces, and it was very disorientating to him. In fact, every room he went to, he dropped to his knees sick. You know, he wanted the physical experience, right? Which is, I find very fascinating. So it's almost like the TARDIS from Doctor Who, where it's like a small little phone booth, and when you walk in, it's like an entire city is in that. So there's no such thing as space. They've mastered this dimension and space within this. So I found his experiences fascinating. And I've had my own contact experiences, and I've seen many ships, and this is one of the best ships that I've ever seen, and I saw it like right in front of me, and with a group of witnesses at a concert. And this was above a lake, and I tried to film it with my iPhone, and it didn't look like anything. What's that? There's always drugs, man. Anyways. But no, not this time. Okay, this was on camera. Okay. But basically, it was a light ship. It was a light ship. It was like plasma in the sky that literally I could take a rock and you could throw it and it would go right through this thing. It was not a physical ship. And I was watching it with a bunch of people, and it like a dimmer switch, a light, it just dimmed out of existence. It didn't fly away. It just dimmed out like a light, and it was gone. And it was just for me, it just phased into our dimension and just changed its vibrational rate, and it just phased into another dimension. It was so simple. It was so simple. It did not fly. It flew over the lake, but then it just disappeared. Very interesting. And then here's a shot that my wife Monica took in Palm Springs, California. And she's also very psychic, but we didn't see this. This is like a very fast cylinder ship. I would say this would be a metallic ship. And our frame rate was 1/1000th of a speed. So this is moving extremely fast, and in fact, your eye will never see it. There could be hundreds of these things going above our heads constantly. Your eye cannot pick it up. So it's this camera equipment set at very high rates that sometimes pick up these ships, but even at that high frame rate, it's still blurry. It's still moving faster than the frame could capture it. So these things are moving so fast that the laws of physics would just ignite in a ball of fire in the sky if this was in our dimension. So what I say is, like, we are seeing shadows of another dimension when we see these ships and craft. And many people see a ship and it will just kind of blink in and out of different locations. Just, it'll be there and suddenly, and I've experienced this myself. I saw this metallic ship, it looked like a dart, very shiny metallic silver, and it was like right here, and suddenly it just went beep, and it's like here. How did it get from here to here? And at these things, you see these little bursts of energy, these portals open, and it just kind of skips in the sky. It just jumps. Because space travel is the dumbest thing ever. Really, an advanced being will never travel through space. It's so stupid. Because to get through the speed of, to get to other planets, to go the speed of light, this is 15,000 miles per hour with a little piece of plastic hitting a solid sheet of aluminum. It's like a nuclear blast. If any little debris touched a spacecraft in outer space, it would go right through it, kill everybody. And there's lots of debris in space. It's crowded with debris. So flying very, very fast in outer space is not the answer if we want to explore other worlds, right? So I believe these ships are moving through dimensional gateways or portals. And in 2012, this is an article that came out from NASA by Dr. Scudder, Jack Scudder from the University of Iowa, and he found that in the Earth's geomagnetic fields, he's found something called X spots, which means that the solar winds from the sun, the ionizing radiation from the sun, when it touches the Earth's magnetic field and crosses certain lines of magnetic fields, it creates a portal in space-time. And they don't know where these portals lead to, but they could see them opening up randomly all over the geomagnetic fields in outer space. And they sent up more than 2 satellites to study this and confirm that, yes, there are portals opening up in our geomagnetic field constantly. But they don't know where they lead, and obviously they fear us. He said that this portal could open up, you go through it, and you'll be on the surface of the sun. You know, so who wants to travel through that? But if you go back to ancient knowledge, we've always known about this portal system on the planet. We've known about the ley lines and the grid lines of the planet, which is the almost meridian channels in which the ion radiation goes through the geomagnetic fields of the Earth, and that energy is transferred over the surface and the sky and under the oceans, energy. And we know this, and ancient people would find these things called ley lines or dragon lines, and they would find power spots, and these power spots was a place of great power. It's where the veil was the thinnest, and they would build their temples and castles, the most important places, in the spots where these lines of energy cross. And one of the most powerful places on the planet would have been Egypt. It would have been Stonehenge. It would have been all the Bermuda Triangle, the Dragon's Triangle in Japan. There will always be sites on these places. And these spots on the planet were known since the beginning of mankind. And we've heard of fairy circles. Fairy circles. You ever hear the stories of fairy circles? If you get lost in them, if you step in a fairy circle, you can just disappear. You'll never be seen again. And this was a great fear that people knew, and they said it was the fairies that would take people. You know, and there's cases, if you go back in the history books, you could find case after case after case of people just disappearing, children just disappearing in the forest, and people would like literally see them disappear. They just walk and they just dissolve into nothing, never to be found again. So they say if you ever heard strange sounds in the forest, run the other way. If you ever see strange lights in the forest, run the other way, Travis. You know? So this is old knowledge that we've had with us. We've forgotten about it. This is a great story. Who has seen this? Just a couple. This man is from Toronto, actually. And he went with his family to New York to go skiing with his family. And he was on the Bunny Hill. Do you know what the Bunny Hill is? The Bunny Hill is like where you take the kids to learn how to ski. It's not a hill. It's flat. And basically, he's going down the Bunny Hill with his family and disappears. Completely gone. This was national news across America. They were freaking out because one minute he's there, the next minute he's gone. No trace, no one knows. And they were searching for this man for 6 full days. Law enforcement knew about this man being missing. He shows up in California, still wearing his ski clothes, 6 days later. And in his memory, he's on the ski hill. Next moment, he's in California. For him, it was instantaneous. For everybody else on the planet, 6 days has gone by with no trace of this man. Did he travel through one of these circles, these fairy circles on the planet, and get transported somewhere? There are cases, every single year you'll hear a case being reported of some type of animal being placed somewhere in the world that it shouldn't be there. And this is a giant whale that was found in the middle of the Amazon forest with no explanation. And they said a storm picked it up and dropped it in the rainforest. But if, and I don't want to be gross, but if a whale fell out of the sky and hit the ground, it's going to explode. It's going to be carnage everywhere. There is no harm to this animal. There's no traces of blood or anything. And even this was this year, 2019. And this is from the article. It says, although scientists presume the enormous creature was hurled onshore during a storm, they do not understand how it came so far inland or why it was swimming off the coast in the first place. This whale is not local, all right? So this whale came from somewhere else. They don't understand. And then here's another oddity. We talk about different examples of finding very, very ancient artifacts in stone. And this hammer was found in an old mining shaft covered in 400 million year old stone. So could you place an object on the planet and let's say a portal was activated and it went through time and it deposited that artifact? Just another, who knows, right? Who knows about the seven sleepers from Italy, Rome? Does anybody know this story? This is a very famous story in Italy. It talks about seven people trying to get away from Roman prosecution of the Christians back at the time of Christ. And these 7 men ran away from the soldiers, and they found a cave in a mountain near Rome, and they went to sleep that night. In the morning, the 7 men woke up, and they went down to Rome, and they realized that Rome overnight had become a Christian community. And they were shocked, and they couldn't understand how overnight Rome became Christian. Little did they know, they were 300 years into the future. And word got to the emperor of Rome, and he took it as a sign of resurrection because they were Christian. And he made these 7 people saints, and you could still visit their grave in that cave where they traveled 300 years into the future just by sleeping in that cave. Okay? Interesting, right? And all over the world, we have these special doors carved into nowhere. And if you speak to the indigenous cultures, they say these doorways lead to other worlds or portals to other places and temples across the planet. And at one time, they were active where you could physically walk through these doorways and end up somewhere else. And not surprisingly, next to these doorways, archaeologists find richest caches of ancient mind-altering drugs. Right? And I'll tell you an interesting story. I'm friends with a Zen Buddhist monk who's been meditating his whole life, and he was invited down to Peru with the shamans. And the shamans were very surprised with him because he didn't need to take ayahuasca to leave his body. He just had to meditate to leave his body. And when he came back to Canada, he was so excited to talk to me because he said to me, when I left my body with the shamans, we went into these doorways into other worlds within our world. And he was so excited to tell me that that was his experience in Peru, is he got to go to other worlds through these doorways once he left his body. So then you have stories of the big and little people, right? And here's a footprint of a Bigfoot that we took up near Mount Adams in Washington State. And it's the first time I've ever seen a Bigfoot print. And what's very strange about it is there was 4 steps in the ground. Nothing before, nothing after. And the last footprint wasn't a full footprint. It was like 3 toes kicking up dirt. It's like it jumped. So the last footstep is a jump. And when people see Sasquatch, they're running like hell. And it's like you follow them with their eye and they're gone. It's like, that's why people can't catch them. They're running really fast because hell no, they're not getting stuck on Earth. You know? I would run too, seriously. Because these beings live, in my opinion, they live in one of these earth plane dimensions, and they use the natural portal system of the earth to jump to different places. And this is what people are witnessing, is them jumping into one world into another. And this is why we can't find physical traces, except for footprints. Pardon me? Not even 2 years. Not even 2 years ago that was taken. So I want you to watch this video very, very carefully, okay? And see if you can see what I see. You see that little guy right there? I want you to watch it very carefully. Did you see that? Oh, slow it down. So there he is. Yeah, looking around the corner, hides, kind of like sticks his arm out again to see what's going on. Very erratic. See how fast he went? But this is the crazy part right here. He like turned into a ghost. It's like he just went back to his dimension. He phased right out of our dimension. We don't know. This ended up on the internet many years ago, and since then, no one's been able to really figure it out. But this is very, very old and very crappy footage. But the reason I believe this is real is because of the movement. It has this erratic timing movement, almost like its rhythm, its rate, is not synced with the natural environment. It moves way too erratic and fast. And if you've seen these beings, like the little grays that kind of look through your door, it's not normal speed. It's like very jittery. So when I saw this, I'm like, it's the same jitter I've seen with these dimensional beings, because they're not in our vibrational rate. So here's a story. This is, I made this picture. It's not a real picture, but it's exactly what it looked like. I was in the forest with a friend at night because we are camera nerds, and we bought new cameras and we wanted to test it at night in the forest. And in the distance, we see this very bright light on the floor. And it looked like a road flare, exactly like a road flare, but it was green, and it was lighting up the whole forest. And we were like, what is this? And we walked right up to this thing. Literally, I'm standing over it. So me and my friend are standing right over this light in the forest. And there's no sound. There's no heat. It's just there. It makes no sense. And we both holding cameras. We didn't take a picture. This is how crazy this is. We are not thinking at all. And I took my flashlight out, and I just put it on this light. And right when the light hit the light, gone. It was gone. I had no idea what was going on. So me and my friend just said, we just saw a fairy. That's the only thing we could come up with is, dude, we saw a fairy. Like, for real, we saw a fairy. I wasn't that smart back then. I've learned a lot since. No, it's just this was if I touched that thing, I'd probably disappear. That's my understanding now, so thank God I didn't touch it. but I came like this close to it. But I've seen these things before in many locations around the world afterwards. And I've seen these bright glowing lights, especially on mountains, just turn on and off like a Christmas tree. I've seen this in many locations. This is Mount Adams in Washington State. And these lights are very bright and they're very big. So this is 14 miles away. So the size of that light is like the size of a school bus. Very large lights. And there's no roads that could do this. There's nobody up there. And I've seen this before. And right when I saw this for the first time, I thought, Fire on the Mountain, Grateful Dead. That was the first thing I thought. I started to sing it in my head, actually. And you hear all these biblical stories about mystics going up the mountain to see this light. And the way they describe the light is it's a non-consuming fire that does not have heat. It's just this bright light. And these beings would have some type of communication with this light. And sometimes beings would walk out of this light. And this is not an isolated incident. This is Mount Takachiko in Japan. And they have a story that's very interesting. They said that their gods that came down from heaven came down from that mountain out of a bright light. And it became the ruling class family, came out of these lights on the mountain. And at the top of the mountain, they put a symbol, which is called Amono Sakahoko, which is the three-tethered spear that belongs to the gods who descended from heaven. So this is in Japan, completely separated. It's an island. This is Japan, separated from all other civilization. And they have this historical story, this narrative. We have the trident, the three-pronged sword of the gods found all over the world. From Shiva, Neptune, Adad, we have this continual thing that the gods that descended from heaven had this kind of trident. How can that be a coincidence from all different cultures around the world at the same time? Sengori Mountain in Fukushima, they call this Pyramid Mountain. And for thousands of years, they said there's paranormal activity on this mountain, so they opened up a special museum here. And this is the museum. Pretty cool, right? So these are the gods that come visit the mountain. For thousands of years, they have these experiences of these lights and these beings around this mountain in Japan. Remember, this is a separated culture. They're not having the same movies that we grew up with, yet they're having the same narratives, the same things occurring. And here's a picture from that area of this light ship around this area. Very, very interesting. And this is happening all over the world. So we have the Apu from South America. This is Machu Picchu. And the Apu mean the gods in the mountains. And the shamans would say there are some very special mountains around the world that have a life force. They have a spirit in that mountain, which they say is sacred. It's where beings come out of, so it's a holy mountain. This is all over the world. They have these holy mountains. This is a picture from Nicolas Roche from the early 20th century, and he is famous for trying to discover Shambhala up in the Tibetan mountains, the Himalayas. And he was an artist and a mystic. And this is how he drew the gods of Shambhala, which were fires on the mountain that the mystics would go and sit by these fires and get enlightened and receive messages. And this is his book, Nicholas Roerich. I can't really say his last name too well. And this is a journal of his journey in the Himalayan mountains. And this is from, let me get the date here. Where's the date? Come on. It's from, what's that? It's like, I think it's like from 1929 or 29. Okay, so this is from 1929. I'm not good with Roman numerals. But check this out. This is from his book, which is a pretty freaking thick book. I had to go through to find this thing. There is something far above the bird, and he shouted in his astonishment. We all saw in the direction from north to south something big and shiny reflecting the sun, like a huge oval moving at great speed. Crossing our camp, this thing changed in its direction from south to southwest, and we saw how it disappeared in the intense blue sky. We even had the time to take our field glasses and saw quite distinctly an oval form with shiny surface, one side of which was brilliant from the sun. So this is from the 1920s, and he's describing a UFO experience in the Himalayan mountains. So that's a pretty old experience. So I did a little artwork to try to show you from 1927 of what this man probably saw, very similar to his experience. And he was with his Sherpas. You know, you never go alone in the Himalayas without the Sherpas. This is what the Sherpas told Nicholas. They said, the beings from Shambhala are blessing you, which means you are going to have access to the lost city of Shambhala, because these are the beings and ships from Shambhala. Okay, this is crazy. So these Sherpas saw this as a great sign that he's being welcomed into the Himalayas. So it wasn't like an odd thing. They knew all about these flying things back then. So I would like to put forward my belief, which is that Shambhala, Shangri-La, Agartha, Thule, these are ancient cities that are in a dimensional reality on the etheric plane of the earth. So we have access to these cities, but they're not in our physical dimension. They can pop in and out, and we can actually travel to these cities. And this is the big secret. And I'll run through this pretty quickly, but even in the Ramayana, they talk about the Vimanas, and they use the exact same description of what it looked like flying in the sky as what Nicholas shared as well. So this is very ancient knowledge. And I just, a side-by-side of a Vimana from ancient texts is on the right, and a US Navy applied for patent in 2006. So we've had these type of experiences and knowledge for a very long time of these type of craft. And the Vimana are the mythological flying palaces or cities, chariots described in Hindu texts and Sanskrit epics. So they see like entire cities floating in the sky, and they've mapped it, they've made artwork about it. And here's a picture of a flying city in China. And many people are like, okay, that's fake, that's an illusion, right? But I think they're missing the point, because this photo was taken in a very special place on the planet. This photo was taken in Bengali City, China. In Bengali City, China, for thousands of years, they have stories of mystical cities showing up out in the ocean, mystical cities showing up in the sky. And this is where the 8 immortals come from. So all the stories of the 8 immortals from China come from this secret city that would appear out into the ocean or would appear in the sky, and many have tried to get to this city, but if they get to this city, they're never heard of again. They disappear. So it was very dangerous trying to get to this city, and only the immortals could travel back and forth from these cities that appear in and out of existence. And this is not an isolated case on our planet. This is from the New York Times, 1889, called The Silent City, and it talks about people in Alaska witnessing cities appear in the sky that are so clear they could make out the buildings and everything. And the local people that live in Alaska, they're running like hell in the other direction while the stupid tourist is looking up at these cities. And they said that, okay, it's just an illusion. But guess what? This is in Alaska, And the closest city was in the UK, almost 3,000 miles away from Alaska. That was the closest city to this event. So how can we explain that? But this is happening all over the world. Birigan City, the invisible city in the Philippines, which is a very high technological city. This was maybe like the vision of Atlantis that we have. It appears in the Philippines, off the coast of the Philippines all the time. And the people are so afraid of this city because anybody that goes near this city will disappear forever. So they just don't talk about it. And here's a story from Japan, a very famous story about the fisherman who said that he was invited by the gods to go to their underwater palace. And how did he get there? He rode a giant turtle shell, right? That's a good description of a UFO, right? So this gentleman rode a giant turtle shell into the ocean to visit the gods. He said he stayed there 3 nights underwater with the gods. And when he returned back to his home, he realized that it was hundreds of years in the future. So it seems like there's a time dilation to go into these other worlds. And when he returned, everybody he knew was dead. And it became a very tragic story that's still told today in Japan. As in, just know if you go to visit the gods, probably everyone you know is going to be dead when you return. So it's the same thing with those 7 sleepers. They time travel when they go into these other worlds. Now, you all see him sitting next to John D'Souza back there. He's the one who showed me this document. This is an FBI document called a Memorandum of Importance from 1947, where it was a scientist who was trying to enlighten and tell the FBI, debrief them on what UFOs are. Okay, this is extremely fascinating document if you haven't read it. It's called the Memorandum of Importance, July 8th, 1947. But there's only a couple lines I really want to read. The region from which they come is not the astral plane, but corresponds with the lokas or talas. Students of Stoic matters will understand these terms. Okay, that's very strange. To talk about a UFO and where they come from, it's telling you to learn about the lokas or the talas, and then you'll understand what a UFO is. This is what the document is saying. So here's what the lokas are. In Hindu cosmology, lokas are planes of existence or worlds that are identified with both traditional cosmology and states of meditation. These planes exist just out of phase with our 3D reality, but are interconnected. The lokas also correspond to the word egg in English. And if you are familiar with the works of Aleister Crowley, he claimed that he opened a portal through ancient rituals where a being called Lamb manifested. And whenever Aleister Crowley talked about Lamb, he would use the symbol of the egg as the symbol of Lamb, which is very Stoic because we know that egg means lokas, and he came through the portal. And this is what Lamb looked like. And he named Lamb as a Tibetan word of the way or path, and Lama. So very interesting. And I know there's a lot of weird information about this guy, and I just, take everything with a grain of salt, right? So we have these experiences with beings that look like this, look like Lamb, these gray alien beings. And I actually personally came in contact with one of these guys. It was a very strange experience. Basically, I said, I wake up in the room and there's a freaking gray alien and standing in the corner of my room. And immediately, I get a telepathic message from this guy or being, and it said, I am an old, short man. That's what this thing said to me. I am an old, short man. And right away, I'm thinking, this thing is trying to Jedi mind trick me? And I looked at him like, no, you're a gray alien. And it turned and just walked out of the room. And I was like, damn, I'm so stupid. I could have asked this thing anything or tried to communicate, and I was like an asshole to it. You know? So I have regrets with a lot of my experiences. So I'm hoping it happens again, please. But I was an out-of-body experience. This was not physical. This was not physical, what I experienced. So is there advanced civilizations living in the inner earth or earth planes? We always hear about the inner earth and different beings and things. And I just want to show you this picture from Utah. And it's a very awesome picture of a petroglyph. And I don't know if you know this, but I'm an expert at reading petroglyphs. And it says, eat this mushroom. Come with me through the portal into other worlds, where you can meet Ant-Man, horned little elf, and other creatures that we have in our nightmares. It's a good read, right? So these natives have this connection and understanding that there is an altered state of awareness that we can travel through portals to other worlds within the earth. And these beings that exist that we may call aliens from another planet are actually very ancient beings that live in the earth plane, and we have a history we could actually look at, you know? So I believe a lot of information we get it's not really good. If we go back to these ancient texts, we get a very different understanding of what these experiences are. So the multi-dimensional earth plane reality. So this is another cave with a lot of paintings. I showed this to Michael Tillinger yesterday, and he's like, those aren't aliens, those are torus fields. If you knew Michael Tillinger, you would laugh. But anyways, these beings that are described in cave paintings are on, Ringo Starr. I knew it. It makes sense now. Wow, now I will always see Ringo Starr. But anyways, these were beings of shamanic journey. In meditation and healing journeys, they would enter altered states and they would come in contact with these type of beings, which look very similar to what we call gray aliens. So here's a quote from Buddha about the multidimensional world that we live in. As a net is made up of a series of ties, so everything in this world is connected by a series of ties. If anyone thinks that the mesh of this net is independent, isolated thing, he is mistaken. It is called a net because it is made up of a series of interconnected meshes. Each mesh has its place and responsibility in relation to other meshes. Trying to explain that we live in a multidimensional world and we have an effect on the multidimensional world. All right, we really do. There are other inhabitants in this world, and just because we can't see them doesn't mean that we're not infringing on their territory or hurting them. Just because we cannot see them doesn't mean we can't affect them. And they can affect us as well. All right, it goes both ways. So in dimensions, in Buddhist cosmology, there are 10 realms or dimensions. In string theory, there's 10 dimensions. And in Kabbalah, there's 10 dimensions. I mean, these are a lot of coincidences about dimensions. And this is a very big study, billion-dollar study from a very reputable institute where they studied the human brain. And their conclusion was the brain can create structures in up to 11 dimensions. So as we're in the physical world, our brain is actually tapped in to the multidimensional world. But we haven't really come to the understanding of how we could interact with these other dimensions, even though they are working within us. So we're just starting to understand how our brain works and how it connects to this multidimensional world we live in. And now I'm going to get a little weird, I think. So bear with me. Not like any of this was weird what I said previous. Since the beginning of recorded history, mankind has been trying to connect and communicate with other worlds, gods, and beings from beyond, right? Great example, the Ark of the Covenant was a communication tool with God or another type of being where they would receive messages. This is another thing from NASA, exploring the quantum world. In this article, they say, we have a coil design, an antenna that we discovered, that we can communicate with the quantum world in other dimensions. And this is the coil. It's a beautiful coil, right? This is in 2012. That's under the floor in the Integratron. Need I say more? Here's Nikola Tesla and his patent of that coil. He's a smart cookie, right? And this is from the Library of Congress. Nikola Tesla promises communication from Mars and messages from outer space. He believed that using these technologies, he has opened up a communication to other worlds through this spiral, this amazing spiral he created. Today we have a new type of computing called quantum computers. And this is a company called D-Wave Computer, Quantum Computers. And this is from David Deutsch, one of the top quantum computer pioneers. And this is a quote from him. Quantum computation will be the first technology that allows useful tasks to be performed in collaboration between parallel worlds. Listen to the language of these people. Language is very, very important. How to describe this is 2005. This is Geordie Rose. Please look him up. He's so awesome. He's the co-founder of D-Wave Computers, and he's the co-founder of also Kindred AI. And I know a lot of people have questions about AI. He's probably the guy to talk to. He said that standing in front of a quantum computer was like standing at the altar of an alien god. Listen to the language that this gentleman uses. And this is another fantastic quote from Geordie Rose. Listen very carefully to what he just said. These things we are summoning into the world now are not demons. They're not evil, but they're more like the Lovecraftian great old ones. They are entities that are not necessarily going to be aligned with what we want. So this transition is massively important for our entire species to navigate. No one is paying attention. This thing is happening in the background while people bicker about politics. And underneath it all is this rising tsunami that, if we're not careful, is going to wipe us all out. That's insane what this person just said. And this is the future of computing, people. Google already has this computer. I actually talked to Geordie Rose, and he totally changes his tune, like none of this he's ever said. So every time I ask him a crazy question, he's like, you're crazy. It's all physical, there's no such thing as parallel worlds. But when they go out and talk to their friends, this is what they say. So it's like two different people talking to two different types of people. So what's a Lovecraftian great old one? This guy his writing is amazing. This is what Lovecraft said what a great old one is. They could only lie awake in the dark and think whilst uncounted millions of years rolled by. They knew all that was occurring in the universe, but their mode of speech was transmitted thought. Even now they talk in their tombs. When after infinites of chaos, the first man came, the great old ones spoke to the sensitive among them by molding their dreams, for only thus their language could reach the fleshly mind of mammals. So he's talking about these interdimensional beings that can communicate to mankind through dreams and shape their future. Really interesting. We see Lovecraftian monsters all the time in our media. This is Stranger Things. Who've seen Stranger Things? Okay, the monster, the big monster, is a Lovecraftian, great old one from another dimension. There's nothing new on TV. I hope you noticed that, right? Here's the Mist, the same exact thing. That's a Lovecraftian, great old one. Exactly. Exactly. So the Mist. The Mist is, remember I told you about Barry Littleton? How in the spaceship, when he would transfer into another room or dimension, this mist would come into the room. Many people experience a mist before they have this experience or have a spiritual experience. Like I remember as a child, like a UFO would come and get me, and it would be like the door would open and this great thick like fog machine mist would come out of the UFO, and you walk into the UFO, and then I don't remember anything else, and the next thing I remember is opening the door and walking out through the mist back to my room. There was always this mist. So I was going into another dimension. That was the sign. So seeing the mist is like seeing through the veil. It's passing through dimensions. The Mist of Avalon. Do people remember the movie The Mist, Stephen King? Craziest freaking, you gotta see this movie. Basically, the military does an experiment. It's always the military doing an experiment, right? And they open up another dimension, and this mist goes through the town, and suddenly the whole town is overrun by creatures from another dimension that is just basically eating everybody. Great movie. And then the military fixes the problem, the mist goes away, and everybody's dead, but they're back in their dimension. So, great movie to show your children. But we have the Mists of Avalon, these ancient stories about the palaces. If you would go to these sacred worlds and palaces, you'd have to go through the mists. And what I want to say is there are other intelligences that inhabit our multidimensional worlds. All types. People say, tell me the races of these beings, tell me the agendas of these beings. How could I? I stopped counting how many beings I've come in contact with. And the strangest thing about beings, they never tell you their name. They never tell you your agenda. It's like they don't walk up to you as, hi, I'm somebody from the place. That's never, ever happened. It happened to me once because I was talking to a reptilian, and I thought that was, wow, I am talking to a reptilian. I need to know something. And I said, where are you from? And it said, we're from Sagittarius. I don't know. That's what they told me. So there are other intelligences that inhabit our multidimensional worlds, and are we able to interact with these beings, worlds and dimensions, through various mediums? And we do have something very interesting that we can communicate to these other worlds. Crystals. Crystals are like quantum interfaces to other dimensions. This is literally what a crystal is. So as we hold a crystal, we're tapping into other worlds, tuning into other worlds. Here's a great quote from Rainbow Wolf, age 6, because I listen to what children have to say. There are so many other worlds, sometimes when you hold special rocks, you can hear them. Is that a great quote? So here's the Tesla coil, petroglyph, the same coil that Nikola Tesla used to communicate to other worlds. Did our ancestors leave us clues on how to connect to other worlds? And I'll pose another question. Are our ancestors in the multidimensional world waiting for us to find them again? Are they still there with us? Interesting question. So this is what this being said to me. And it said, the time has come when the great beings of light, masters and ancestors, will be incarnated. These are the hybrids of mankind, those whose job it is to raise the vibrational level of those, and this is the most important line, and connect between the worlds. That's the most important line. For some reason, mankind is being pushed in a direction to awaken to the fact that there are multiple worlds, and we have to figure out how to connect to these other worlds. And that's what I think right now. It may not be what I think next year. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to skip that time. Okay, so I'll just end it with this. Did our ancestors walk into this world from other dimensions? We talk about ancient aliens and spaceships and all these things, but what if these great beings didn't even need a spacecraft to come here? What if they could have just walked through these portals that the Earth naturally has and start civilization? Isn't that much easier? Yeah. Okay, so I'll leave with the Shambhala prophecy. I'm getting off. Okay. This is an old prophecy, so listen very carefully. The gradual deterioration of mankind as the ideology of materialism spreads over the earth, when the barbarians who follow this ideology are united under the evil king and think there is nothing left to conquer. Check this line out. The mists, we're talking about the mist, the mists will lift to reveal the snowy mountains of Shambhala. As in, one day in our future, maybe the dimension will shift and we'll actually see these cities that are on the planet. They will just appear. The barbarians will attack Shambhala with a huge army equipped with these terrible weapons. Then the king of Shambhala will emerge from Shambhala with a huge army to vanquish dark forces and usher in a worldwide global age. Isn't this like the same type of prophecies that are always coming? So I love looking at this stuff. And just I'll end it right now. Here's some cool pictures I took of dimensional beings. So our cameras can pick up things that our eyes can't. So we do live in a world filled with these type of beings. Elementals, literally. How many people have seen elementals? Exactly. Come on. We have to take responsibility for our actions here on earth. We have to be kind to ourselves and others and our environment, because just because we can't see the other worlds doesn't mean we can't affect them in a very negative way. And we are actually doing that. So there are people waking up to this fact, and this is how we're going to start to change, is to know that we're actually causing damage in other worlds by our actions. So thank you very, very much for your time, and I'm happy to close this amazing, amazing conference. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And he's a federal agent, so be nice to him.
Isn't he one of the nicest people you've ever heard speak? I mean, he really, Jason Quitt.
Thank you.
I love this man. He's so genuine. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All the way from Canada, right?
Yes.
Eh?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a long way when you ride a snowmobile.
So we have a special treat for all of you. We weren't planning on doing this, but it just kind of came through. And as you're probably aware, especially after Jason's presentation, synchronicities are happening, and we're all getting downloads in the moment. We're all really feeling connected. How many of you felt super connected through this conference? Yes. Did we level up? We learned a lot, didn't we? So, and how many of you in this room saw Eric Rankin's presentation yesterday? So quite a few of you. Oh yeah, 2 days. It's been 2 days. Gosh, I've been in a cave. Well, Eric is back. And one of the things we're going to do is show his Sonic Geometry 3 video. It's a message to the citizens of Earth about the future and the purpose of humanity. And it fits right in with everything we've taken in this weekend. So we encourage you to stay. We're just going to play a quick video clip from it. We really would like you to absorb this message. And then afterwards, we'll bring all of our speakers back on stage, okay? So stay with us.